you a good price on Moxie.
All right, we're back live after 4. It's just past 2:00 in the General Housing Committee. We are going to shift our gears to discussion on H-184. Before I turn the microphone over to Representative Chestnut Tangeman, I'll just give a quick recap for people who are just tuning in on it. H-184 was the issue that came up in H-184 is that there was a change in who was going to enforce the licensure of and certification of folks who had to replace or remove lead paint in renovation. And this was originally an EPA regulation, and the state applied to take enforcement of it away from EPA. The EPA approved. So but what happened, and this has been in effect, these rules have been in effect for 2 years, almost 2 years now. And what these rules did, was that?
6 months.
It's just been 6 months.
Yeah, October 1st.
And so what these rules propose to do is to make sure it exempted child care centers from paying the fees related to the licensure. But it included landlords in that. And not only just the licensure and the certification, but also in order to get the license, they were required to get insurance, which apparently doesn't exist, and it would be several $1,000s a year for that insurance. And so it's kind of it's a bad situation. So we have not had a lot of testimony on this because I think the answer was clear, and we were hoping that there would be this a solution that we could find. And so we have had testimony. We did, and then I'll pass this to Rob, but we did have conversation with the Department of Health, and this is what we're coming up with. We had talked about maybe asking the Department of Public Safety to do an emergency rule, but after conversations with the Department of Health, this is what Representative Justin Tangeman was able to work out with Katie McClin.
So, thank you, Chair. So as you know, we looked at a number of different approaches to resolving the problem. And the problem, just to restate it, that landlords under the existing rule, landlords, in order to work on properties they own, do lead paint remediation, are required to be licensed and insured. Child care centers were exempted from that. Child care center owners, in order to do work on their own property, need to be certified, but not licensed or insured. And in our earlier efforts, we were really focusing on that distinction between being certified and licensed. It's the same training. That was problematic. We're looking at, thoughts included some threshold for landlords who own X number of properties can work on their own, but if over that, it's an arbitrary threshold. We were looking, the last thing that our committee looked at was directing the Department of Health to implement an emergency rule stating that landlords could work on property they own without licensure. The difficulty there being that it's a whole program, is an EPA program, which is administered by the state of Vermont. So Vermont's rules need to be approved by the EPA as the parent agency. But our directive to implement an emergency rule would not have EPA approval and potentially might not get EPA approval. So this is looking at taking an entirely different approach, not making a distinction between certification and licensure, So this, what it does, can you scroll down? Actually, I'm cutting to the chase here. Keeps the existing language requiring a license in order to do work lead paint. That's section A. And then we've added a section B, which basically says that if you are licensed and you're working on rental housing which you own, you do not need to buy the insurance. And that was because that was the catch, the insurance that was required but unavailable. And if it was available, we heard an estimate of $3,000 a year, which is untenable for a small landlord. So this doesn't mess with certification or licensure. It says you do need to be licensed, but you don't have to purchase the insurance in order to do the work yourself. So that resolves, it's another approach to resolve that catch-22. Joe, sorry, Representative Parsons.
Fine. I just have, so this is creating basically a third scenario, because you're saying that childcare right now has to be certified but not licensed or insured.
Correct.
And painters have to be certified, licensed, and insured.
Correct.
And then rental people have to be certified and licensed and not insured. So we're really taking out all three whacks at this kind of approach.
There is no issue that we cannot complicate.
So if we know childcare only has to be certified and it got approved, why would we make it different for this?
I think certified and licensure are two different things. You don't have to be certified and licensed. The complicating factor of the conversation so far is that federally, in the federal EPA rules, they're synonymous. It's not synonymous in the state. So I think we're asking childcare to be certified, landlords to be licensed, and professional painters to be licensed with insurance.
So what's the state's distinction of certified and licensed, if there isn't one at the federal level?
I think the idea there was that if you were, that it was a less than, and I can, if we don't, I'm going to turn to Alan Bjerke here, who's been following this. What, do you know the state's difference between certified and licensed?
Vermont is the only state that has made this distinction. All other states have a certification program. The federal government was a certification program. The distinction, I think, was made because even if you were a certified childcare operator, you had to pay the $300 EPA fee. Here, they broke it out so that there are no certification fees for childcares, and landlords and professional contractors were both required to pay the licensing fee.
And the licensing fee was $300.
It's $300 plus $50 per year, so it's about $100 and something a year.
300 one time, 50 a year. So what you're saying?
300 for 5 years,
Oh.
plus $50 each year.
Okay, got it. So 110 each year.
Because the health department requires that a landlord get both a firm and a supervisor licensed to work on their own project, their own property. So that was one of the things that we're trying to cure, is to have the double fee, double license problem. This doesn't do that. This fixes the insurance.
This fixes the insurance, yeah. And
It's a bigger fish.
Yep, it's a bigger fish, and we can, through, continue to look for clarification or resolution on the licensure certification question fees, but this resolves the problem at hand, in my mind.
Okay. So I guess my question from there would be, would I be right in saying that collecting that fee is pretty much our main distinction.
At this point, you're just talking about whether or not landlords working on their own property have to have these, pay these two fees.
I would suggest that we say no, because we know who's gonna pay those fees. Try to make things affordable. Clearly, we know where the money's gonna be coming from to pay the fee, so. I would,
And I had been hoping that, we were hoping that David Englander would be here from the Department of Health, but he's got a,
He may be available through.
um,
so, sorry,
No,
I do
no,
have
no,
that.
go ahead, no, finish.
I was just gonna say, if nobody else has made the distinction, it sounds like we're the only state who's making this distinction. Clearly seems like it's acceptable with the EPA if that's their rules with certification.
and I don't know the answer to that. I do know that this was approved by the EPA. This proposal, solution. But I don't.
For a different state.
know for
No, for
us.
us. This,
Over the weekend.
yeah, this.
So the EPA certified this over the weekend.
Because
They,
It does sound.
so Edward P. Anderson.
At all.
So
They did.
my understanding, and Alan can maybe add insight into this, is that Vermont is the only state that requires insurance. So removing the requirement for insurance, that's the way other states already operate. So it wasn't, there was no new ground for EPA to consider. It was like, oh, you want to do what everybody else is doing? Okay.
Which would lead me to believe that saying it also has to be certified would get the same rapid.
I did, my initial read on this was, oh, they just need to be certified. And he said, no, they need to be licensed and pay the $300.
per hour. Sorry, I apologize if I'm just hogging this.
We have to go through it.
But $300 per hour?
No.
No. Like, wait a minute.
No, I just feel like I'm,
Oh, you are.
Wait a minute.
Charging by the minute now?
I think Sally had heard per hour and Joe said 4 hour.
Okay.
4 hour regulatory environment. Yeah, but yeah.
his point is that that doesn't meet Vermont standard. Not the EPA standard. Which or
At this point, I can't speak for him.
We can get that correct.
And then Mary. I'm done.
Then Emily, then Emily.
And then Kayla's.
Okay, okay. So I just have a quick question. How does this, so the whole purpose was to simplify the process for landlords to be able to renovate and do the things. So under this new provision,
Mhm.
would they be able to do their own renovations, or would they have to have a licensed and insured painter do the work?
Under this, if they are licensed, so if they do the training
Uh-huh,
and pay the licensure fee, they can do their own work.
without being insured,
Correct.
okay.
Marion. Representative.
So, thank you. So technically, what is the difference between a certification and a license? Is it the $300 for the license? And do other states have the same
Representative Barr,
procedure?
your question? I don't know, that is something that
Yeah,
we
we're
need the Department of Health to
Well,
answer
you're a
that.
contractor, don't you know?
I got certified,
You got certified, but you
No,
didn't get
but-
licensed. Why?
but that was
That was under
20 years
EPA,
ago.
yeah.
Oh,
under the EPA program.
it just, I mean, it just seems like it's a lot of paperwork and.
Yeah.
I don't know why we have two levels.
And you don't know if any other states have the same.
Correct. That would be a question for the department.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Emily.
Actually, we
Oh,
have
gosh.
Representative Bartley, then Elder, I believe. Did you raise it? After?
Yeah.
After. And then Representative Gaza.
The biggest part about sharing is knowing,
Yeah.
having the lizard eye so you can see where they hands go.
How much is the training? Is it like thousands and thousands of dollars?
It's $250 to $300. And then in addition to that, you have to use the special HEPA equipment, and that's probably another $500.
And the training is some 8 weeks or
No, it's 8 hours.
8 hours.
But it has to be hands-on, so you can't do it all remotely. So there's 2 hours.
Just a take-home test.
I think the test is take-home, but you have to take the training, which includes 2 hours of hands-on, and then pass a test with at least 70 scores.
Yes,
Can I ask a follow-up question?
absolutely.
Is the training similar to EMP certification? Is that what we're talking about? I'm sorry, I'm a little confused.
It is a longer, more repetitive version of EMP. You learn how to bag the stuff with
Sure.
the with the
And it's hands-on.
smart head twice instead of once.
I'll probably have follow-up
Right,
questions.
so you learn about dust control, you learn about chip management, about draping landscapes and
So
HEPA filters and.
if I could just continue on in my brain, and if this doesn't make sense, just please let me know. So I've worked for a property management company before, where it was a third-party property management company, and our maintenance staff just had to get EMP certified. And that's just for the cleanup, correct?
That I don't know.
Welcome to.
Until October 1st, a maintenance staff that has EMP work could work on the owner's property.
Okay,
So any property management that they were doing, they could do that work. It's only after October 1st, they needed to actually become licensed.
so now, say there's a spot that's less than that square foot. Who takes care of that? Do you have to have a certain level of training for under less than a square foot?
No, under 1 square foot, no EMP training, no any training, you can fix it.
Okay. I'm back on board, thank you.
Two spots. Representative Elder.
Yeah, it's interesting, this is a funny kind of bill because in some ways we're like being presented with an opportunity to fix something that we haven't really done the back work on because it was done a number of years ago. But it's interesting and I'm kind of feeling like I'm learning more as we go, which is typical. It kind of sounds like we created the certification category because we wanted to lessen the burden on childcare centers and also on landlords. And so I like that this change avoids the insurance issue. But I also am a little disappointed whenever I see legislative intent get so 180'd in rulemaking because it just shouldn't happen that way. If you get a rule back from the EPA and you look at the bill and the bill says one thing and the rule says another thing, you shouldn't implement that rule. If the rule was created based on legislation and the rule does an opposite thing of the legislation intended, that's not a successful rulemaking process. And I'm just disappointed that the Department of Health is coming forward and saying, here's our rule, it's opposite of what you intended, but we're good with it, And so I do like this as a workaround. It kind of seems like it's true, the, $110 a year is going to get passed on to renters, but $110 a year is not insane. Certainly not to the level of,
And that's not per unit. that's just per license, that's just per.
Understood, understood, yeah. So no, I think it's a good, I think it's a good solution, which I appreciate the work that went into. And I also feel like it would be great if rulemaking stopped flipping things around quite so often.
Representative Krasnow and then LaBounty. And
Well, I'll chime in. So look, I understand all that and agree. This was obviously very complicated above what I understood at first. And I've been learning a lot in this process. And I've said this before, I'm really grateful. This seems to me like the best solution right now, and it needs to happen soon. And because it's costing people and trickling down to low-income renters. If that's where so for now, I think this is a really good workaround. And like I said, I'm grateful for the folks that worked hard to figure this out, who had the experience. And thank you. And there's always another day to look at things again, but we have to, I feel like it's our duty to come up with a solution to this. And I think this is the best one.
Right, and if all that's left are fees,
Right.
which are things that get dealt with in the Ways and Means Committee, and people make the choice, the Department of Health will make the choice whether to raise a fee or get rid of a fee, and then it'll get handled through that process. We are in a weird several-year process of not having a fee bill, so these haven't been addressed in some time, but that would be the place for the fees to be addressed, whether they are enough. The fees are raised to run the program. So if enough fees are raised, the fees are supposed to be geared towards how much does it cost to run the program, and dial the fees in higher or lower depending on what the income is.
And interestingly, this licensure is not in the Department of Real Estate, it's not in OPR. It's in the Health Department,
Correct.
which is unusual for
Along with childcare license.
Yes.
Representative LaBounty and then Lamont.
I apologize. I'm trying to get a beat on this. I got a 10-part question. So you're saying that a childcare center that might have dozens of children, they only need to have a certification, but they don't need a license and they don't need insurance. As a landlord, if I have a couple of apartment buildings, I need to have a license and insurance.
This would take away the requirement for.
No, but I'm at right now,
Right.
as it is now.
Yes.
Now, I don't know, I just kind of find it kind of weird in a way where that is a license require more training than a certification?
No.
Okay, so it's just money. It's not really, it's just a cost whether you're getting a certification or a license.
I think it's probably what it links back to is that insurance and liability. You're a licensed professional with liability and insurance to cover that liability.
Okay, so I just did, so let's say I got a certificate and I just did a childcare unit that's got 25 kids in it. All I need is a certificate, but I don't need a license. I mean, I don't need insurance. So where's the liability? I mean, you're talking about all these children. I mean, wouldn't it be more important to have it the other way around?
You have to be the owner of the child care center to do the work under a certificate.
Now,
Out of the building or the business?
The building.
Or blood relative could be owner of the building.
And that's, there's assumptions that the business of a childcare center carries insurance, carries liability insurance. So it's not like they're totally insurance free.
okay. Yeah, I just didn't want to, I mean, the way I was envisioning it was like, it was less important about the childcare than it was for the landlord, but, okay, so that clears that up, okay.
No, that's an easy, that's not hard to envision, especially when we take stuff out of context like this.
All right, thank you.
And I would add.
I have only 5 there, so I got 5 extra.
In a childcare situation, there is constant supervision and monitoring. And so the childcare center operator will know if there's peeling paint, if there's dust, whereas the landlord, they don't inspect the units regularly.
Thank you.
Annually, we do.
Right, but I mean, you don't see it every day and to paint this paint.
Just to, go ahead.
Do you want to say?
No, I was just gonna ask Alan, but a question that's tangential.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to explore one more time for clarification purposes, because we also do labor issues. So back to the painters. I just wanted to see if there's any possible unintended consequences for painters, because painters have to be licensed and insured, right? So would this, and then, but landlords have to be licensed but not insured, and that gives them the ability to do their own work, right? And so do we have any information or data on how many landlords seek out painters who are licensed and insured versus doing the work themselves? Just because I don't want to put painters out of business, they have that higher risk of being requirement to have the insurance. So that's investing in their business. But if this is going to take away from their business, then that's an unintended consequence. I just wanted to look at that. I know we're looking at housing and making things easier for landlords. Just looking at big picture.
So one clarification is that license and the insurance is lead paint training only relates to housing built prior to 1978.
And any addition to that structure, yes. Well, I come up here so you guys can all
Thank
turn it
you. Sorry for screaming.
So yeah, so you're talking about pre-78 residential rental property. But for example, I gave the example of if you had a house that was built in 1960 and you put a wing on it for an ADU, even though that addition was put on in 2022, that property is subject to it because it's attached to the pre-78 structure. It's a little bit bigger than all pre-78 structures, yeah.
And I think it's a really good consideration, Rep. Lamont. I did remember hearing testimony, and it might have been from you, Alan, that I think there's very few of these contractors right now, and at least at this point, I think the work available probably far outstrips the people available to do it. So maybe that's somewhat protective. I just wanted to mention that, but I think it's a good consideration.
Yeah, the current list of firms is presently just around 80. And the current list of supervisors, so because one firm can have more than one supervisor working under them, is I believe just under 200. 193 is I think the last number I saw.
Representative Parson.
Why, thank you. Just kind of, since you're right in the seat there, I'm going to ask this question. It doesn't really pertain to this a whole lot. Same idea though. During a remodel process of a home, is there a way to certify a lead-free home? I'm thinking of remodels I've been on where it's studs left, you know, is there a way where a home can get certified as lead-free?
There is. It's a higher level of training than and licensure than we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's called lead abatement. So when you're talking about remediation, if you say abatement, you've gone way over. And that is incredibly expensive. And you would probably never do it unless you were trying to make sure that the Hilding, historical structure, could be safe for handicapped people, children, people with particular exposure issues.
I'm just thinking of remodels that been to that
We
work.
would never do this in a house.
For Andy right now.
Pavement, they come in with X-ray machines afterwards and it's a very expensive, just to hire the consultant is thousands.
Okay. And the other would just be stating again that if it's the exact same level of training and everything else, it's just the state not collecting a few $100 from you. Seems.
Yeah, we can get that, we can get that double check.
Yeah, if I'm correct. And as far as the fees, to go to pay for the service, maybe we use the fees for the training process itself, I don't know. But we don't necessarily just use fees apparently as really making sure that the program works.
The fees don't go into a special fund. These fees go directly to the general fund. And then the Department of Health is funded from the general fund. They may come and say, look, we're making this much money, you should spend this much on us. But there is no actual direct.
Okay. I was just going to point to the DMV fee increase that they didn't need, but they still got a fee increase. So there isn't an exact correlation between that. So.
There's no science less precise than fees, I find.
So I would, at the end of this, I guess I'll see if I still push for just certification after.
Well, being tangential, you mentioned about getting inspected. Is that part of the landlord registrations in Burlington?
No, this is a statewide requirement that the EMPs have had to do since 1993. Annually, you need to inspect the inside and outside of a building. There's one that you fill out noting any areas of deteriorated paint, and you file that with the Department of Health. And if you don't file it, they start to send you regular emails saying, where is it?
And in terms of lead coverage, let's just say, I know I have an 1864 house. I don't rent it, so I'm the king of my own castle. A lot of the lead rules came, if I hired out, somebody would come and tent my house. But back 20 some odd years ago when I bought the house, the idea was not lead removal, because this is about lead removal. Mostly, like, is in this.
No, this is disturbing any surface that potentially could have lead paint, which is defined as anything that is prior to 78 structure.
So if I had, if I needed to paint something that, I was told that I could just paint with latex over lead and that would be, without scraping, that would be sufficient to.
That's called encapsulation. That paint will not stick for 2 years if you don't disturb the surface first.
No, I learned that. Yeah. What's that?
Just walking.
No, I took it by hand. All right, any further questions on this language right now? I mean, we have a couple, I heard 3 to 4 questions to ask the department at the least about clarification on some of the language that's used. But again, this was something that after talking with a couple people, especially the Department of Health, this is what Representative Chestnut Tangerman asked Katie to put together.
Could I make one clarification? Because it's occurring to me that I believe I represented to you that every other state has certification and no other state requires licensure. I'm now remembering Delaware has licensure and the fee for a landlord is 0. And no insurance requirement. So the reason that I picked 7 of the 14 states to show you when we went through my presentation is because there are some states that are quite different. And so, for example, Delaware, I just want to make sure that you understand this, does require licensing, requires the same training, but a professional has to pay, $300 a year every 5 years, and a landlord working on their own property gets a license and the fee is 0. I didn't want to confuse you with 14 different schemes of regulation.
No, but this piece right here, as Representative Chestnut says, is the nut. I think we identified back in even as early as January when you came in here and brought this up, is that this piece is the nut. You know, the fee part of it, it'll be part of the process moving forward. But this piece here was really what that was what hooked me into thinking like, how did we end up here? So we didn't feel like we could make an informed choice on fees.
Representative Krasner.
When can we vote on this?
Tomorrow.
Okay. And again, open
If
to,
we put it on the schedule.
Right.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is,
oh,
so the question about voting,
yes,
right, we're not passing H-184.
okay.
Okay, because if we do it on the floor, we'll get a unanimous vote, and then it would summer over. So if we want this
Oh,
to
right,
pass this
into law, right.
year, then we would attach this language, and my proposal will be to attach this language to our S-100 amendment and see if we can get that into S-100 cleanly. There are other potential avenues for this that would include putting this language directly into the budget, which is not rare, but we would prefer to keep it in with like bills. This hasn't been a simple process. This isn't a simple little bill. The implications are very complex, but it's the simplest solution to what was in front of us. So we would have, when we're ready, to have a struggle adding this, supporting this language and then adding it to our amendment.
Just a process question. Is it possible to have multiple amendments for S-100 from our committee?
Sorry. The short answer is yes. The other possibility for this, because it doesn't have any money in it, would be this, we could attach this on the floor when the S-100 finally gets to the floor. We can just do what we see in our processes. We can say, go through the round delay of the right committees and say we're offering this amendment. The money amendments are harder to attach on the floor because they're big money. So again, that's really the final path. It would be to do it on the floor. Again, I think it would pass unanimously.
Yeah, I still am not a huge omnibus bill person. I just like, we got something we like. I don't even like attaching it to S-100 personally, but they just do this stuff on its own, but as opposed to saying, well, here's 5 more things and we're all gonna attach them as one to something else, just here's something we know that.
Yeah, it's just that it won't pass this year.
No, if we attached this to S-100.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And then something else.
Representative Howard.
May I ask a question on behalf of one of my constituents asked? There is a Motel Inn across from where he lives that has housed people without homes for over 30 days. If there was work being done at that motel, license and certificates are not required?
That's not the case.
No? Okay.
If they're working on a pre-78 hotel that's no longer being rented for periods of 30 days or less, because the definition of target rental housing includes an exemption for transient housing, which is less than 30 days. So if they're in if the tenants are staying there for more than 30 days at a time, then you have to have a license in order to do work on that property, the training and the license.
Thank you.
That, by the way, is one of those cutoff points, which is why you'll see you can't stay in a hotel for more than 30 days. You're like, why? Well, that's why. There's a bunch of rules like that.
Well, and there's been some changes to that because of the pandemic. But yeah, generally, this is actually more specifically the conversations we've had. This is short-term rental. This is a short-term rental thing that, yeah, there's definitely some exemptions from the 30-day thing, group homes, nursing homes, some hotels, but not. And certainly during the case of the pandemic reaction, you know, the response to the pandemic, that those hotels were, we made clear.
Yeah, and to be clear, my comments wouldn't reflect anything that has been an emergency rule that I
Yeah.
know about.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the law,
Yeah.
without exception.
But that short-term rental thing is really what it speaks to. 29, I believe, and then you get the 30th day, it's like tenant at will. All right, let's take some time off right now. If we don't have any further thoughts on this bill, we will see if David, his meeting, I think hopefully was gonna end 4:03 or at 3. So, we will see him, and then we will return to S1 3.
Salad.